Welcome to the final episode of Season 12 of ECCB Connects. Today, we share with you an excerpt from Governor Timothy N.J. Antoine's engagement with the media during his country outreach mission to the Commonwealth of Dominica. During the session held 4th March, Governor Antoine and his delegation shared information with the media about the prospects and performances of the ECCB and the region, and fielded questions on a number of topical issues including COVID-19, Correspondent Banking Relations and de-risking, economic diversification, and improving economic growth.
Governor, what measures are being put in place to protect the currency in case there is an outbreak of the virus within the Caribbean region?
So we're very concerned about the incidence of the COVID-19 novel coronavirus, which, as you know, is now in the Caribbean. And CARPHA, the Caribbean Public Health Agency, has indicated that our region is now at a high risk in respect of this disease or this virus. The immediate focus of the central bank is to support our member countries with their capacity to detect, which means testing, and also to prevent, contain. So we've said to our member countries that the ECCB is ready, with their approval, to help with providing equipment and the requisite medical technology to ensure that we can do effective testing in country, because up until very recently, as we understand it, Dominica was the only country in the ECCU that has the testing capacity for COVID-19 and for influenza A. We want to ensure that all our member countries, all 8, have that capacity. Because if you have to send it to Trinidad or some other country outside of the region, there's going to be a delay. So you want to speed that up so you can establish status of persons who may be presenting or otherwise, and be in a position to determine the course of action that's required to contain the spread as much as possible. So that's the immediate focus of the central bank, giving support to our countries. Beyond that, we stand ready to provide liquidity support if required by any member country or financial institution. At this point, that is not really the issue. The issue is just focusing on making sure the requisites. Now, having said that, the bottom line and the best defense mechanism for this virus, as we understand it from the health authorities, is our own conduct in terms of prevention. No handshaking and hugging, hand washing, proper hand washing, and the requisite boosting up our immune systems and making sure that we take care in the arrangement. If you're sick, don't come into the office. Make sure you get checked out and stay away from the office if necessary to prevent the spread. So that's our role at this time. We continue to monitor the developments very closely, looking at CARICOM, CARPHA, international agencies, obviously the WHO and PAHO, and we'll be guided by that in terms of any additional responses that the bank may design to deal with this particular situation. We're very, very mindful that beyond the health issue, it has implications for the economy. Once people get sick, the health authorities are involved. Once people have to stay home, it affects the work, the productivity, and the output of the country. Tourism is our lifeblood in many of our economies. We're very dependent on tourism. So this is a very significant issue, which we're paying very close attention to.
Mr. Abraham Jr., you mentioned that with structural reform, Dominica could see 2.7% growth within its economy. But do you get the sense that there is the appetite to effect the structural reforms within, say, this fiscal year so that that can actually happen and Dominicans can realize that sort of prosperity?
Yes, so you'd have realized that one of the key components of those structural reforms would have been the business climate. So the governor would have spoken about, and we would have spoken about the credit bureau coming on stream, which would help credit, which would then boost the doing business environment, giving investors the confidence to come in and to invest. So some of these structural reforms are low-hanging fruits that the government can tackle And we know, based on the agenda the government will pursue for the year, that you will see some improvements in the business climate and also in other sectors. So as the NPLs fall, that will help growth. So it is many structural reforms that can happen simultaneously, but also affecting one may actually affect the other, which will help the country to grow at a faster pace.
Also, in your presentation, you mentioned that with regards to Dominica, there is no loss of correspondent banking relationships, if I'm not mistaken. And of course, but within the ECC, that remains a challenge. Would you say that Dominica is out of the woods when it comes to the de-risking issue or not?
I wouldn't say out of the woods, as de-risking is still real in our part of the world, but Dominica has done well in the last 2 years without losing a correspondent bank. And as I would have indicated, we continue to advocate, we continue to work hard, because de-risking is real. It also affects our economies. If we get de-linked from the international banking sector, it has a ripple effect for how we survive. The governor would have indicated many countries in the ECCU, tourism is our lifeblood. If we can't get those funds to come in, we'll see reduction in growth and reduction in the living standards. So we continue to advocate, we continue to work hard on this topic. Dominica has been blessed in the last 2 years not to see any corresponding banks lost, but we want to make sure that it's concrete going forward. So we want to make sure that we're not speaking about it hoping for the best, but we can speak about it with more certainty, knowing that the bad times are behind of us and our banking system is more stable and more efficient in terms of the corresponding banks.
According to your presentation here, I think now Dominica, we are actually going to put that into legislation for the ECCB to have regulations to control all the banking institutions, particularly Dominica.
There's been a big focus on a global fight against money laundering and terrorist financing. And our countries have been doing the best that they can. But in the last 5 years, we have come up against the threat of loss of correspondent banking relations, de-risking. And so the Monetary Council took a decision in 2016 to confer on the ECCB the authority to be the regulator for money laundering and terrorist financing in our member countries. So that basically means that that legal authority must now pass from the country regulator to the ECCB, which is a regional regulator. And that process is on the way. We believe it gives more strength to the oversight across the financial system for all of the entities which are licensed under the Banking Act. So that's our banks, but any other entity licensed under the Banking Act. But more importantly, it gives additional confidence to correspondent banks. And it is very important that we protect our correspondent banking relations. That's critical for our economies. We have to be able to connect with the rest of the world and do trade with the rest of the world. So that is why the decision was made. So right now, it's now in place in Antigua and Barbuda, St. Vincent and Grenadines, Grenada, and now Dominica. St. Lucia is partial, and we are working with St. Lucia to further concretize the arrangement there. Our expectation is that all member countries will eventually pass it into law.
You mentioned that tourism is our lifeblood, and you did indicate that it's going to be a leader in terms of driving economic development. I would like to know, what do you make of sectors such as agriculture and digital services like web design, graphic design? Do you see that having a place as dominant as tourism, or maybe near dominant, like a second and third place, given that these are new industries in terms of, for us here, digital services and so on?
I'm quite happy you brought up the digital and the agriculture part of it. Agriculture will and continue to play an important part in ECCU economies. Food security is almost as important as national security. We must be able to feed ourselves. And we must use the digital and we must use technology to better improve these sectors so that they can add more value to our countries. So it may be that tourism is number one, but these sectors can bring value. The linkage between tourism and agriculture, how are we able to feed the tourists, how are we able to feed ourselves? Bringing the digital economy into that and using digitalization of certain things for that. The governor always gives us the example of the fisherman or woman catching a fish out at sea. They should be able to upload that to the market So that fish is sold even before they return to land. So the ones they return to land is just a matter of delivering the fish. So we see these sectors playing important role, or as important as tourism. But one of the things we want to definitely stress is the linkages and the improvement of all sectors, so we can diversify economies, so that we're more resilient. That is the key underlying thing.
With regards to the question that you raised, that it is basically easier for private sector to gain credit from the credit unions as vis-a-vis the commercial banks, how much of a concern is that to you in terms of the private sector getting credit much more easily from the credit unions rather than the commercial banks?
So when we stated private sector, we also mean businesses and households in terms of the private sector gaining credit. We know the importance of the credit union to Dominica. We know about that movement. It's also a concern for us that the banks are, reducing their lending. But this is where we have initiatives that are coming forward. The credit bureau, the registry and the collateral. These are things that we are putting in place to help the banks feel more comfortable at extending credit. Therefore, as more information is known, that the bank can feel a lot more comfortable extending credit. So we know the credit unions have filled the void in our economies, and that has been good. But we're also working to ensure that more information, more things are developed so that we can therefore have the banks now lending. So we can have the banks lending, the credit union lending, and our economy is growing at a faster pace.
To view any episode of ECCB Connects anytime, any place at your convenience, check us out on YouTube, Facebook, and LinkedIn at ECCB Connects.
We now present Did You Know?
Did you know that the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank, ECCB, is responsible for issuing and managing the availability of the EC currency in the 8 ECCB member countries? These member countries are Anguilla, Antigua and Barbuda, the Commonwealth of Dominica, Grenada, Montserrat, St. Christopher and Nevis, St. Lucia, and St. Vincent and the Grenadines.
We've come to the end of the final episode of Season 12 of ECCB Connects. While we're on break, stay connected with us on social media and join us on 6th May for new episodes about who we are, what we do, and how we serve you. During this challenging time, the ECCB and the ECCU Bankers Association are working together to help address the social and economic consequences of the COVID-19 pandemic on the people of the ECCU region. We encourage you to use electronic and online banking platforms and to do all you can to keep you and your loved ones safe.